All right, so the next couple of videos, I wanted to spend some time just kind of reviewing the stuff we've done before we hit spring break. Because I know, I don't know about you guys, but I tend to forget a lot of things when we have like a week off. Okay, so the last thing we covered was how to graph quadratics when they're in standard form. Okay, so that's what I want to look at in this video, is graphing in standard form. And it should look pretty familiar. So graphing in standard, form. And that's the equation that looks like this. Y is equal to ax squared plus bx plus c, right? And we did look in the other videos of like, what does the a value control? What does the b do? What does the c do? Okay. In this video, I want to kind of just take it as a whole. Okay, so how do you break this down into pieces? Okay, so there's really three steps you need to be familiar with. So step one in graphing these things is the most important piece, because if you get this piece wrong, the rest of it is also going to be wrong. Okay, so step one is you have to find the vertex. Okay, remember the vertex is that center point. Remember, we're graphing these parabolas, the U shapes, right? So the vertex is the center of that U. So again, it's the most important piece. Okay, and if you guys remember, the way you find that is with this idea of negative b over 2a. And we get those values from the b value and that a value. Okay, so that's step one, is find out what that value is. Negative b over 2a. And again, I would recommend set it up with parentheses ahead of time, like so. That way you're less likely to miss a possible double negative situation, which will come up once in a while. Okay. After you have the vertex, then you can go on to step two. Okay, so step two is once you know where the vertex is, then you can create a table. Okay. Now in the past, when we made a table, we just kind of plugged in whatever numbers we wanted to, right? It didn't really matter. But because we're working with these parabolas, we want to make sure that the vertex goes in the middle and we build our table around that value. Okay, so I'm putting parentheses here. Vertex goes in the middle. Okay, and typically 5 points is a good amount. And the nice thing about these parabolas is, remember, they're symmetrical, right? So realistically, you're not actually plugging in all 5 points. You're pretty much plugging in three, because once you know the center and then two on each side, you can use that the law of symmetry and kind of match the other ones up, which you'll see in the example when you go down below. And then step three is the easiest one. Once you have all that information, all you gotta do is plot the points to make a graph, a parabola. So plot points to make parabola. Okay. And some couple key things you want to make sure on your parabola. Make sure your points are clearly visible. Make sure it's a U shape, not a V. Right? It shouldn't come to a point. Okay. And make sure your graph is as nice as possible. Okay, especially on like quizzes, tests, and homework. Right. If it doesn't look like correct and I can't see those points, then I have to take some credit off. Okay, so I want to make sure you guys are as precise as possible with these graphs. Okay. All right, let's go into an example together that we can kind of see what's expected. Okay, let's go and write down first example, graph y equals, and let's go with negative 4x squared plus 24x plus 6. Okay, now if you guys remember the previous videos, you should have a general idea right now just by looking at it, kind of what your graph is going to look like, right? The fact that the a value is a negative number, we know where our graph, our parabola, is going to be upside down. It's going to open downward, okay? The fact that it's a 4 means it's going to be very wide, right? If it was a fraction, like that's less than 1, it'd be very narrow, okay? So we have a general idea of what it's going to look like before we do anything. That way, if our final product looks off, we can figure out what happened. Okay. So let's go ahead and go into step 1, which is the vertex. Again, this is the most important part. If you get this wrong, the rest of the question is going to be wrong. So I would double check, make sure you do this part correctly. Okay. So again, it's negative b over 2a. I would set it up with open parentheses, like so. Okay. Now we can plug in our values. So our b value is a positive 24. So 24 would go in here. If it was a negative 24, the negative would go with it, and that would be one of those double negative situations. So be careful of those. And then the a value, as we already said, is negative 4. So negative 4 is going to go in there. Okay? Simplify, and then we can go on to the next step. So negative and 24 make negative 24. 2 times negative 4 make negative 8. And then now we can simplify, right? The negatives are going to cancel each other out. And 24 divided by 8 works out very nicely and gives us 3. Okay? So we know our vertex is going to be 3, comma, something. We don't know what the something is yet, but that's fine. Right? The 3 is the key information there. Okay? So now we can take that, we can go into step 2, which is the table. Okay? And again, we're not going to just pick out random numbers for our table. We're going to base our information off of our vertex. Okay, so let's go make a table. X, Y. Okay. And our vertex is going to go in the middle. So that 3 is going to go in our middle. We want 5 points total. So leave a couple spaces up top. The 3 goes in the middle, and then 2 more spaces down below. Okay. And we want 2 values above 3, and then 2 values below 3. So we just count up by 1 each time. So if 3 is our middle, then we can go 4 and 5. And then if 3 is our middle, we can go 2 and 1. Okay. So far, I've seen some mistakes on like quizzes and homework that sometimes students just assume that these are the same numbers every single time, which is not accurate, right? It depends on what the vertex is. The vertex goes in the middle. Okay. And now we have to go and plug these in, which you are allowed to use that Desmos scientific calculator. Right? You can type in exactly the way it looks, but you have to write down what you're plugging in. Okay, if you don't write down what you're plugging in, it does not count. Right? You have to show what you're doing. Okay, so let's start off with that vertex. So if we're plugging in 3, we're using that original equation up top. So it would look like this. Negative 4, parentheses, squared, plus 24, parentheses, plus 6. Let's go ahead and plug in 3. Okay, so you have to write that down to get credit. Now you can go and use that Desmos scientific calculator where you can Google Desmos calculator, and it's usually the first one that comes up. Okay. Now I've already done this off screen, so I'm just going to go ahead and jump to the answer. If you type it in correctly, you should end up with 42 as your answer. Okay. Now it might seem like it's a very large number, but we'll talk about that in a second. Okay. I need at least 2 more, right? Because it's symmetrical. So let's go ahead and plug in the 4. The previous videos I usually plugged in the smaller ones, but just to show you that it doesn't matter, let's go ahead and plug in the 4. So negative 4, parentheses, squared, plus 24, parentheses, plus 6. All right, and now let's go ahead and plug in 4. Again, you got to write it down to get credit. Okay. And then you can use your Desmos calculator. Again, I've already done it off screen. If you do it correctly, you should get 38. Okay. Now I need 1 more. So let's go ahead and do it one more time. Let's plug in that 5. So negative 4, parentheses, squared, plus 24, parentheses, plus 6. Okay, and let's plug in the last one. Plug in 5. Okay, again, Desmos, I've done it off screen. If you do it correctly, you should get 26. Okay, and that's all you have to do because, again, this is a parabola, so it has to be symmetrical. So if this is 38, then this one also has to be 38. If the top one is 26, then the bottom one also has to be 26. Okay, so that's what you have to show to get full credit in step 2. Okay, all right, almost done. Last step, step 3, is the actual graph. Okay, now just to show you something different, when you run into a situation like this where the numbers are a bit larger, don't freak out. You can actually customize your graph to match the values in our table, right? Normally I would say start off with like a 5 by 5 graph, right? But if you look at all of our values, notice all of our values are all positives, right? So if that happens, we can kind of simplify our graph. Okay, so step 3 is the graph. And since we're only dealing with positive numbers, there's no negatives up there, let's just make one of these L graphs. So it's just positive in both directions. Okay, this would be the X direction, this would be the Y direction. The X direction is easy because it just goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The Y direction, a little bit harder because they're larger numbers. But what you can do is you can customize your graph. You don't have to go by ones. Okay? So for this one, it might be nice to go by 5s. Okay, so let's go 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45, 50. Notice I stopped there because the biggest number in our table is 42. So I have enough space there. Here's the catch. If you are going by a number other than ones, you have to label your graph. Okay, so 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45, 50. Okay, the x-axis we don't have to label because we're going by ones, but if you want to make it look nice, you can label it just as easy. Okay, so now we're set to graph. Okay, obviously we can't be super accurate because we're going by 5s and it's not a lot of space, but we can be pretty close. So for that first one, 5, 26, right 5, up 26, it'd be somewhere about here. Okay, second one, 4, 38, right 4, up 38. So that would be somewhere about here. Okay, now our vertex, 3, 42. So 3, 42 would be a little bit above there, so about there. Then the other ones are symmetrical, so they should line up, right? So 2, 38, right? 2 up 38 should match up with the other dot. Okay, and last one, 1, 26, right 1 up 26, about there. Okay, that's enough information to get a U shape. Remember, it's not a V, so make sure it doesn't come to a point. So it should curve out this way. Notice it's very wide, like so. And that's a complete graph. Okay. So again, just to quickly recap one more time, 3 steps, right? Step 1, find the vertex. Step 2, make a table, putting that vertex in the middle. And then step 3 is use those points to make your graph.